The race is on.
Good afternoon, good morning, saints and friends. Welcome to The Race. The race is on. And on behalf of Reverend Dr. Ambrose Carroll, the founder of Green the Church, and all of our entire leadership and our staff across the states and our workers, those who are working in different states across the country, we want to welcome you to this installment of our second podcast for the second season. Our podcast for the second season. And we're grateful today for everything that God is doing and the work that is being done in Green the Church and all of our organizations who are helping and partnering with us. And for those of you who are joining us, we want you to please, as you join in on today, we want you to, if you're on Facebook, like, click, and share. If you're on YouTube, push it out to others. We want to get as many people engaged and involved in this work that we are doing. We'll be here with you for just this hour, but we've got a really exciting show that's coming up. As you know, if you joined us on our last podcast, all of the siblings, we were here. I'm number 2, Ben Jr. I pastor the Greater Antioch Church in West Palm Beach, but I also proudly direct Green the Church Florida and are excited about the work that we're doing in the state of Florida. On today, we're going to be, as we move through the race, we're going to be talking about the intersectionality of faith, mental wellness, and the climate movement. And we're glad to have Reverend Emily Carroll with us from the great state of Louisiana. She is our National Policy Director, and Reverend Bruce Carroll, who is our director, our regional director in the South. And he along with his wife and this team, they do a great work down on the south end. So this is Florida. So this is a part of the southern region or area of the work that we do, whether it's Georgia, here in Florida, in the state of Louisiana. And as the Lord says the same, we'll be including Alabama and some other states as we move through this. So we're excited that they're here with us on the call. And we're also excited that you know that Green the Church, for those of you who don't know, if you're with us for the first time, Green the Church was founded about 15 years ago. And our younger brother, Reverend Dr. Ambrose Carroll, had a vision and saw a space where the Black church needed some attention, or needed a space for the Black church to get involved in the climate initiative. One of our goals as Green the Church is to be the primary repository for the Black church community centered around faith and sustainability and issues that are related to climate, issues that are related to justice. And so we wanted to bring that to bear. And so we're here today. We have 3 pillars of our church. For those of you who are not here, 3 pillars of Green the Church. I'm going to ask Pastor Emily if she could very quickly elaborate on those, if she could a little bit.
Sure, not a problem. So we are the way we do our work, the way we do the work of Green the Church. We operate up under what we entitle as 3 pillars. And those 3 pillars include building power for change. That's the pillar or the arm where work such as action items as it relates to our legislature, as it relates to policy. That's where that type of work falls up under. One of the other pillars is promoting sustainable practices. And so when we think of promoting sustainable practices, that's everything from our community gardens, that is everything from disaster preparedness. Those are the things that deal with practices that help us to sustain one another and to help our communities and our churches be leaders in this conversation of how to maintain relevancy, how to maintain access, how to be sustainable, and to use what God has given us, to use everything that God has given us for the betterment of our land and for the betterment betterment of our community. And the main pillar that we have and that we utilize is that of amplifying green liberation theology. We are a faith-based organization, and we do operate on this foundational work of what does God have to say about the environment? What does the Word of God have to say about how we are to treat our land, how we are to be servants of the land, how we're supposed to just love on people? And so our environment is everything that is around us. It is our air we breathe. It is the water that we need. It is all of those things, and it is the people. And so we are an organization that's holistic, and Green the Church is a holistic organization where we just want to help Black churches to go green. So we're excited for this podcast, this race, and to have conversation as it relates to how we're going to help one another out. And that's what it's all about, loving on God's people. Pastor Ben.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Emily. Listen, today we're excited on this conversation that we're going to have today, falling under our pillars. We're excited and delighted to have a special guest with us. Kenya Madison is Director of Healthier Delray here in Florida. She's also a member of our steering committee here in Florida. Really excited to have her to be a part of this first dialogue that Florida gives direction to, and excited about the work that she's doing. Wanted her to come on today to be our special guest, and wanted her to begin really just introducing herself, because there's some folks that are coming on. You're from Florida, and we want you to know who we have here in this state doing this great work. So we're going to ask her to introduce herself and tell us about Healthier Delray and the work that she does. And then after that, we're going to dig deeper. We're going to take a deep dive into this conversation on today. Kenya, welcome. Okay.
No, unmuted now. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Kenya Madison. I am the Senior Director for Healthier Delray Beach. And I'm hearing some feedback. I don't know if that's my sound or someone else's.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. But I'm the Senior Director for Healthier Delray Beach. We are a behavioral health initiative that is really squarely focused on the emotional wellness of the most underserved, underrepresented, vulnerable residents of Palm Beach County, specifically Delray Beach, where I serve. But our wingspan really covers much of Palm Beach County, Florida, the southern region of the United States, and other places as well. So I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me today. But we are really a grassroots initiative comprised of residents that have led the way. Even myself, I started out with this initiative as a volunteer, and I'm the director. So I'm happy to tell my story and my journey on a different day, but specifically, we are right at the intersection of emotional wellness and just the alignment of mind, body, and spirit. And then for our connection to Green the Church, it's really important that individuals understand that they have a direct connection to this planet that we live on, and we have a responsibility to take care of it. And so that's really my purposed voice for today. And I'm again grateful to be with you all.
I'm sorry, I see Pastor Bruce has logged in. We're glad he's here. Of course, our regional field director, and we wanted him to say good afternoon to everyone. He's here pinch hitting, just in case I get pulled away. But we're glad he's here, and we're going to want him to say hello to us, and then we'll get started in our deep dive on this afternoon.
Cool. Thank you. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. I do bring you greetings from the great state of Shreveport, of the great state of Louisiana, where I reside and pastor at the Antioch Baptist Church. I also serve as the national director for Bringing the Church. Glad to have you all on today.
Great. So one of the things, this conversation that we're having today, the intersectionality of faith, mental wellness, and the climate movement. That's the conversation we want to have today. But I almost, because this is an important conversation, because this broadcast, even of itself, this podcast, even of itself, built around this idea of the race. We understand the race, and want those of you who might be joining us for the first time, the race is being resilient. Resilient meaning we're a strong people. We're the people who've endured much as a people of African descent. We've endured much, and it's important for us to always make sure that we are grounded in everything that we do and that we're being strengthened. And so this conversation on today is a part of that. We're also Aboriginal. Aboriginal meaning we celebrate our roots, we celebrate our rich heritage, our ties to the mother continent, Africa, our work as a people down through the ages and down through the years. We're also courageous. We're not afraid. Dr. Carroll said in our last podcast, he said he'd been doing the podcast for a little while, and things are getting kind of rough in our country. Some of you may have already, you've heard, maybe even you heard it today or you heard it late last night, that the EPA director has been given a responsibility and a charge to literally seek to gut the initiatives that are directed toward climate change. They're saying, oh, it's not real. So there's some things that are some tough things that are being said about how our country's leadership views this kind of work. And so, but we're going to be courageous. And then we're also going to be empowering. Why are we having this conversation? Because this is an opportunity for Green the Church to sit with other peers and others who are like-minded. And this is where we begin to join forces. This is where we link up with other entities and link up with other organizations to be empowered so that we're able to navigate even this current terrain and what will take place in the future. So that's the race. We're resilient, we're Aboriginal, we're courageous, and we're empowering. That's what we're here to do. Today, we've got Kenya Madison with us from Healthier Delray, who's doing a great work when it comes to wellness, caring for the community. And Kenya, a few months ago, after we had a chance to meet and we kept talking, we had a chance to chat. Kenya, by the way, was one of our panelists during Florida's initiative when we did our one-day climate revival. And so after meeting her and having a chance to really glean from her the work that she was doing, she said something, and she may remember this. I'm going to try to paraphrase it, but she says a healthy planet is tied to our own mental and emotional health. And so that's really the design. That's really the direction that we seek to go in this conversation. I said, well, what do you mean by that? So I wanted her to share how she saw that connectivity between the planet and our own mental and emotional health. Kenya, share with us.
Sure. Thank you again. So the best way that I can sum that up, and I don't recall exactly what I said that day, but I'll restate the notion. But we are deeply connected to where we live, how we live, and is a projection of our own behavioral health as individuals, as communities. We live in communal spaces. We don't just, while you may live in your own home, sure, you still live in a community. You live in a municipality. You live in a governed state. You live in the United States on the planet Earth. So there are certain practices and norms that we all have, like trash day, right? We all kind of govern ourselves by what day we got to put the trash at the road or what day is the recycling day. That is a community behavior. It's not just individualistically impactful. And if we make that parallel thought to nature, we have to take on responsibility of our environment, the way that we show up in our environments, the way that we treat our environment, the atmosphere, the land around us, even healthy practices around agriculture are important. I know that there's a lot of conversation that we can have about ways to leverage our places of worship and even our relationships interconnected within there, but that will lead us down a whole nature of conversation that I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. But again, as a notion, it's important that people just kind of ground themselves and come into a sense of peaceful knowing that where we sit, where we stand is God's creation. And if you happen to own a home, you know, great. But if a hurricane comes and takes the roof off, you are looking left and right for your community support or FEMA support or somebody's support to come to wrap their arms around you and your neighbor too, who may have endured some challenges during that circumstance. So just adjusting a lens to understand that we have a direct impact on our environment now and in the foreseeable future.
Could you drill? I want to drill down on this idea of this is a good example when you're talking about when hurricanes come. There's a lot of support that we give. There's a lot of support that organizations give. FEMA, other organizations come alongside to help people begin to rebuild and restore community. And a lot of times we see that actively. What are some of the things that perhaps we can concentrate on? We talk about how do we how do we repair emotional damage, whether it's from a hurricane, whether it's from living in an environment that is toxic. Of course, in the area in Louisiana, we have those areas, and not just in Louisiana, but even here in Florida, we have those areas where landfills have impacted the environment, and people have to live with the fear. Cancer alleys. People live with these fears of environmental impacts on their community. So, in terms of wellness, I want to drill down on this idea of what are your thoughts, and anyone can jump in on this now. But what are your thoughts? I'll start with Kenya. What are your thoughts? How has disaster? How has COVID? How has even the bird flu? How do these things come to play on our emotional well-being?
I'm so glad that this is a safe space and that this conversation will live somewhere else where people who are not watching today can maybe turn back and have some guidance or direction. Thank you for asking that question. While I can share with you a story of personal impact that has my heart beating real fast when you talk about hurricanes and natural disasters, and you talk about COVID, because I have an extreme personal loss around both of those things. But the title of the podcast is Resilient, Aboriginal, Courageous, Empowering. So I am choosing to focus my emotional energy on solutions, right? Also, taking a look at the fact that you pointed out the Environmental Protection Department
EPA.
dismantled programs. Is that not the most backwards thinking thing that you could ever potentially do? And then there are not people who are living in fear. There are people who are living with grief for generations because they know they have had homes built on top of toxic sludge spaces in their own communities. Their family members have passed away. They are gone. They are transitioned, and you cannot bring them back. And so to still have today policies dismantled that harm humans, and you wonder why humans are not behaving in a way that they honor the earth. It's not a reciprocal relationship. We haven't been given a clear example of how to establish a healthy reciprocal relationship. We have destroyed and dismantled over time, even in policies, what God said, the fullness thereof.
Yeah. And
Take care of it.
Kenya, before you talk about like solutions, I think there needs to be even some space as it relates to some definitions of what is. And some people use this terminology of eco grief. We go through hurricanes and we go through all of these extreme weather conditions because of climate change. And sometimes I don't think that a lot of people stop long enough to acknowledge the grief, the triggers, the trauma from a mental health perspective. I am now triggered whenever there is bad weather coming to Shreveport, Louisiana, because of when we had that ice storm. It did something to me in a way because we had 9 degrees in a neighborhood that never had that, and pipes were busting left and right. So we went through the practical suffering of that, but I hadn't really spoken or thought a lot about the grief, the anxiety, the triggers that have been created because of that experience. Yeah, I do want to spend some time with solutions, but I think that just the conversation of the grief, the trauma, the mental anxiety that is caused by extreme weather, which is caused by climate change, or even polluted air, and the trauma of the fact that cancer might be next in your body because it's been in your parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles if you grew up in the same space. So just stopping to say it, because I think sometimes when we work in it, we assume other people see it, but not all the time. And I'm glad that we as African Americans are speaking to say, hey, yeah, it brings environmental injustice, brings economic issues. It definitely brings quality of life issues. It brings health issues, but then it also brings mental health issues that it's just not spoken in that way often. Yeah.
Yeah, I took off talking far and fast about it because really there is so much to be said about it, and the very important thing is that we do pause to bring some clear recognition to the impact from all points, not just. I mean, sure, we can focus on our individual states and communities where earthquakes or hurricanes or tornado alleys or even toxic atmospheric spaces, water runoff. But there are other places that are very visibly demonstrating the effects of climate change without having weather patterns or extreme weather being even associated. You know, how long have we been watching polar bears swim in melting waters? They've been showing those commercials for decades. So, you know.
I wanted to add, and this is good because I wanted to add this, and I think you said it. This hopeless. There's this sense of hopelessness, and well, I'm using the word hopeless, but caring about the environment and caring about the planet seems to be the least concern, and getting to the underbelly of why we don't care about the planet. Sometimes when you talk to folks, I'll say folks who don't respect the planet are often is it a result of living through environmental duress and not seeing that government doesn't seem to care, and what is life kind of worth living? We got this whole notion now that there's no such real thing. There's no real thing of climate change isn't a real thing. It's not something that we should be concerned about, but it's something that we should be concerned about. It's something that we should care about. But how do we get to the emotional? How do we deal with this emotional baggage that's probably, I don't want to say it's at the center, but at least near the center of why we respond the way we respond, is because we feel helpless, like it doesn't matter. We don't know that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. We don't know that. We don't know that there's a way for us to have clean water, that our communities can be safer communities. We don't know that we can prosper. What is dragging us down emotionally, and how do we get out of this? Right? What's the way out? And how do we say, hey, this is a real problem. This is a real problem emotionally. I might have said a whole lot there.
Yeah, because when you start asking the question of how do we get out of this space, I think that the space that we are in because of the leadership within a Western civilization that feels that they are to have dominion over the land, interpretation of that scripture that really speaks to this elitist dynamic of I can do what I need to do to live and survive, and whoever suffers, suffers. I say that because Pastor Bruce once did a press conference, and one of the taglines on his press conference was, all air ain't equal, right? So what happens is that those persons who have who hold the pen to make the decisions, their quality of air is better than a lot of the masses. They don't live next to these particular landfills. When it comes to hurricanes and things of that nature, they have massive ways of protecting themselves because they have the money, the funding, the living, the plans in place for that small percentage of individuals who make decisions for the masses, and for some reason don't really care that there's a very large percentage of individuals who suffer behind the ills of climate change. And so because the powers that be have control, just like what you just said a minute ago, we have done what we can do throughout the last 4 years to make all of these strides as it relates to environmental justice, as it relates to laws and rules, and taking this initiative to cut down the amount of particulate matter in the air, the soot rule, the methane rule, all of these things we did work hard to do, and they became rules and they became laws. And now to have an entity that is more about drill, baby, drill, and therefore that is now the focus of those that are in control of our administration, at least here in the States. It's always good to sometimes go outside of the box of the United States, because there are so many nations that do acknowledge climate change and do acknowledge that we need to do our part to make some changes, and not always stay too silo in one's own community, because there are those that acknowledge and are trying to do. And I pray that we are able to turn the table sooner than later by the grace of God from a leadership perspective. But I do like your question to Ms. Kenya as it relates to how do we, on the ground, in the front line, alleviate this sense of hopelessness, as it relates to our mental health and climate change.
Thank you. So there was a thank you for all those who are joining in and those who are in the chat. We're really happy to see you here with us today. Glad to have Dr. Thicklin, who leads here in South Florida, who is a part of our Palm Beach Clergy Alliance Council. And so we're glad that he's on the call. But there's a question that went out, and Kenya said something about it, which is really good, right? There's a question that went out. It says there's a study. This is Khalif. Yeah. I'll just say Khalif. I can't say the whole name. I'm sorry, but I apologize for that. There's a study that says the Europeans killed so many indigenous peoples that it changed the climate. And then that was one question. But then there was a question that asked, is there a culture and history that models environmental justice? So Kenya responded to it. So it's in the chat, but those who aren't in the chat, Kenya, can you talk about that a little bit? That's a good.
Sure. It's a lot to say, so I'll just state it clearly. From a global perspective, historically, there have been models throughout history where we have had economic justice and balance. The seventh generation principle, land stewardship with reciprocity, which is a notion that I touched on a little bit earlier. And then what we're talking about right now is eco-spirituality. And so I don't want to be like, oh, there's something new under the sun, because there's nothing new under the sun. We just keep labeling it different things. But what it is just humanity coming into harmony with the earth. If you think of your human body, right? If you consume a lot of things that cause you to be inflamed, if you got gout and you consume a lot of sugar or things that trigger your gout, right? Or you have respiratory challenges and you go into a place where there's a lot of smoke or irritants, you're gonna feel the inflammation within your body. The earth is a living, breathing thing, and it responds to us too. So whenever there is unrest in humanity, whenever there is war, whenever there is a large swell of energy, even, right, you will see the earth respond if you pay attention to nature. If you go out to the ocean shore at a certain time of day or evening, even if you pay attention to, the movement of clouds and how they form over places that don't get much, that have a lot of air pollution, they form differently. And that's not because I've necessarily seen it with my own eyes. I just understand how relationships work. And once you understand how relationships work and you realize that earth is a living, breathing thing, and you take the guesswork out of it. So we have models throughout history and we can apply them contextually and by name. But at the end of the day, we're talking about humans' relationship with the earth and the earth's relationship with humans and how we survive and thrive, importantly, thrive and flourish here on our planet, because what else? And then we also have to talk about sustainable practices, right? Over generations and over time, there have been efforts to course correct and redirect. But I believe that the sustainability of those efforts is embedded in the people who carry it, right? So if there's a shift in culture, if there's a shift in a belief system, if there's even a shift in the weather and how it affects growth patterns, then the persons who carry that are going to be, you can't reverse it, is what I'm saying. And even with spiritual practices, like if there is no rain and we're crying and praying for rain, the tears aren't going to water the crops enough, right? We're still going to have to plant and water in a way that is sustainable, mutually sustainable for humans, for the atmosphere, and for the grounds. My grandfather was a farmer and he taught me a lot, and we had like the almanac in our house and stuff too.
Dr. Thicklin said, he made a comment The land and air has an identity. The land and the air, it has an identity. And that's powerful. So Pastor Bruce lives out in the out in the where there are woods and trees. It's the land that our grandfather owned, land of our father and our family, and out on that land. I want Pastor Bruce to comment when you hear this kind of comment. The land and the air has an identity, and of course tied to what Pastor Emily shared on something you shared a couple of years ago. What are your thoughts about that? The land and the air has an identity.
Oh man, that's good. That's a you hear me?
Yeah.
That's a good point reference that the land and air have an identity. They actually go together. I do live in what's called Holly, Louisiana. We're in the woods, but over the years, what was woods and trees, because of more people moving in, the oil and gas industry, so they cleared out a lot of trees, made some more roads, put fixed roads, and sometimes even with fixing those roads, people travel up and down those roads even more. And at the same token, they may throw trash out on the ground, or may dump, find more places to dump tires or dump refrigerators, or it brings more people up and down the road, but not really taking care of the land in which we live in. So yes, most definitely, there is a conversation, but also in that, y'all, as I think about culturally, and also think about systemically, how we kind of this the way things have always been. Even with teaching, even with sharing, taking care of the land, making sure that that you're preserving the land so the next generation can use it as well, not just to use it up, but how we treat that. So having that conversation about land and air, there's something that said that yes, the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, but also there's something within our system, within our culture, that said this world ain't our home. And so therefore we began not to take care of it and pay more attention. And so that's why a lot of where does that come from in terms of how we think, the problems that have happened in our lives, the anxiety, because of the air that we breathe, all of this stuff, how do we get past that and begin to say, hey, yes, we've got to take care of, yes, there are new inventive ways to say, hey, we can preserve this land, so we just can't use it and disgrade it, but the fact that we've got to learn how to sustain it. So when I hear people say, well, the Lord to take care of it, I'm like, okay, then he's giving us responsibility, that we've got to clean it up. We got to keep it clean. We've got to keep the toxins and stuff. So therefore, we got to sound the alarm when people are throwing trash out on the highway. And that same trash, when it rains, that plastic and stuff are ending up in our streams and our lakes, which come back, and then we drink that water as well. So all those kind of things to educate us. And a lot of times people don't take note of that and think of those things because that's just the way it's always been. I digress.
Thank you. I kept, as you were talking, and I was paying attention and listening. I was thinking this idea, the land and air has an identity, and I thought about the word relationship. Right? And there's a relationship that we have, and it is hurtful. It is hurtful to know. It is hurtful to know that there's a disregard. Right? There's a disregard, and I won't use the word disrespect. Disregard. The difference in disregarding and disrespect. The disregard is like you don't matter. And so the land, the air having an identity for me, and I wish Dr. Thicklin, I get a chance to chat with him later. The land and the air has an identity. It's where it has its own identity. It has its own personality. and the land, the earth. God creates the earth, and we are to be in relationship with all of creation. And so the relationship is damaged right now between our earth and our people, and those who live on this planet. That creates sometimes an emotional trigger. Last year, I came home from Green the Church, and there's a huge tree. I forget what it's called. There's a huge tree behind my house that it provided shade and a place to play. It was housing for squirrels. It was where I put my canopy underneath, and it was where I could be to protected from the sun. I get home from Green the Church. My association had cut the tree down, all the way down. And I cried. I called my daughters and I said, hey, the tree y'all used to swing in is gone. We were hurt by it. Now here's the backside. I had to talk to my neighbor and say, I know you pushed to have the tree cut down. How's your electric bill now? So the house is hotter on the inside, and it being hotter on the inside made me more aggravated with my neighbor. and so our relationship was kind of a little strained before I went over and said, hey, let's talk about how we're going to put some more trees and stuff back here. Let's have some conversation and dialogue so that some healing can begin even in that relationship. But the relationship started as a result of what I saw as a disregard for nature and the value of what we had. It's not a nuisance to have to rake leaves. And that may be the simplest way for me to express this idea and to express this idea of the emotional damage that's been done, eco grief. I think that's the term that Pastor Emily used. These are real issues. Kenya, Kenya had an experience, and I hope she don't mind me bringing it up, around some horses and healing. And I really wanted to talk about that. I really want you to share that, because this is something like maybe somebody might be listening and say, man, I never thought about that as a place of healing, because I know I hadn't. So can you talk about that for just a second? Not just what it is.
Sure. So equine therapy, and it's with horses. There are many forms of it. It's a modality of therapeutic practice, and there are persons who have either turned their ranch or turned their horses into practitioners, if you will. They are trained on how to intuitively understand human emotion in a certain kind of way, but they don't communicate the way that we communicate. They communicate in their own way. So there's a movement, circling about. They'll nudge. They will move their mouth around, blow out, to communicate what they would like to try to say back, right? What was moving to me and very profound was that in the process of them circling and kind of getting to know me a little bit, I spent about 2 hours with these two horses. King and Scout are their names. At the King's Wellness Ranch. I'm giving a shout out to the King's Wellness Ranch in Lake Worth, Florida. But they circled a little bit, and then after getting to know me for a period of time, it was almost as if they came a bit closer and closer, and they gave me a bit of a hug. They put their two faces together, and then tears streamed from their eyes. And then, of course, that made me emotional, and we all had a release. We was all the horses was having an emotional, release, and I was out there crying. And but on the other side of that, I didn't feel like I was carrying the emotional weight that I arrived with, right? Some of what I experienced, I didn't even know that I was necessarily holding. because that's how the body stores trauma. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Please Google that, look that up. The Body Keeps the Score. And it really is about our trauma responses and how our body holds on and decodes and downloads the trauma that we experience environmentally, generationally, race-based trauma, gender-based, just personal traumas. And if we don't have a place and a practice to kind of release that, then it stays stored and trapped in our body. It prevents us sometimes from communicating well. And then in other spaces, it shows up as a lot of other physical challenges. So the experience with the horses was just another example of how we really do need a variety, a multitude of safe spaces and things to have access to, so that we can, one, have conversation, right? Open dialogue, that we take the stigma off of what people feel and how they process. How we process things is a very individualistic experience. But to have animals that are trained, it's no different than an emotional support dog that you would see in an airport these days. And they've been given free clearance. Now, I don't know if I want to see a horse walking through an airport, but I would certainly understand if I saw one, I would get out the way before he galloped. Okay. But I understand now in a very personal way, the benefit and the value of having access and awareness to something like that. Because had I not personally, it would have just maybe been a far off notion that I couldn't speak to at all. But now I personally can. And their patterns of movement, it may be unique to how they are trained or what have you, or what they are, what emotion you are carrying. I'm not sure, but it was a positive experience for me and I recommend it for folks. My son also has participated in equine therapy from a different practitioner through his after school time program. And I asked him specifically to compare for me. I said, what was your experience like? And he was like, it was just cool to hang out with the horse, like to just pet the horse, and we was brushing it. So he had a whole different experience in his mind, but he's like, I want to do it again. He wasn't like skittish. He didn't run off. He was like, yeah, I was with it. And I was too, but in my own way. So it let me know that it would get a thumbs up from at least a family unit. We can say that as feedback, a family unit gave it a thumbs up.
You know, I wanted to ask, Kenya, you had shared some things in the chat, sustainable solutions and indigenous and ancestral practices. Grateful that you shared it in that chat. I think only our YouTube folks are able to see that. Not all the folks on the Facebook side can see that. So I want to know if you can just elaborate on those comments that you have put in writing regarding additional sustainable solutions and indigenous and ancestral practices.
Certainly. So when we're talking about healing and addressing the trauma of grief and eco stress, we've called it out already today: anxiety, depression, fear, health challenges. How do we begin to course correct? And at a later time, I will, or someone doesn't mind, to please like copy and paste what I shared, because I'm logged into YouTube here, but I can access Facebook later, because these are worthy things for people to know. So as it relates to how to heal, there's a couple of different sustainable solutions that we amplify here in our Healthier Delray Beach community and our partnerships, like green spaces and healing spaces, wellness circles, mindfulness walks, along we are right by the ocean here. I know I'm blessed to live by the ocean. And so we have like nature walks both at the ocean, and then there is like natural preserves and parks in our community that give us a space to just ground ourselves and go for a walk and breathe it out, right? And then when you give some facilitation to that and help guide people through maybe a mindfulness practice or breath work around a nature walk, they emerge on the other side of that saying, oh, okay, and it becomes a meaningful activity for them. So that's one example. Green spaces, nature, healing circles, of course, our counseling and talk therapy practices. The intersectionality of faith and mental health is very, very important to discuss and amplify, because when it comes to conversations around how to even manage our mental health, there are people who are still stigmatizing and labeling other people's emotions, other people's lived experiences. And it's not for us to place judgment or value judgment on. It's for us to embrace. Okay. Storytelling. I'm a storyteller. I love storytelling. I love the ability to have people share their lived experience and have it produced as kind of like this unified cultural experience, so that everybody walks away with a sense of shared understanding and even a shared vision on the other side of that, because that produces action. That produces action. Sometimes it looks like a project, an initiative, a street cleanup, a let's gather and do this or that, but it's authentic, and things that people take ownership of, they usually take better care of it. And those are all ways that we can process, places that we can process the emotions that we're holding, the grief, the feelings of loss, the feelings of anxiety, well, I don't know how to grow a garden, right? There is someone in your community that does, and they more than likely would love to come to your home and teach you how to plant a raised bed garden, so that you can kind of get your feet going in that direction. Calling out certain practices around healthy living, right? We partner with the American Heart Association, and they tell us that 30 minutes of physical exercise a day reduces your risk of stroke and heart attack. 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise a day. But more than that, right? Paying attention to what you put in your body. Mm-hmm. Making sure that even if something is labeled organic, if it's packed with sugar, it's probably not a good choice, because the sugar is going to have an effect on your body. So really turning the package over and reading the label. And I love a good farmer's market where you can have access to like fresh fruits and vegetables. If there's a co-op in your community where folks do a veggie and fruit swap, things of that nature. Just making sure that you have even healthy rituals and practices. I'm a person that likes to drink my water and mind my business. That's what I'll say, right? But as I'm drinking my water and minding my business, I'm probably gonna be burning some sage or a Sao Paulo stick.
I hear that. I hear that.
Okay.
I hear
Um,
that.
I love a good mug of tea.
Uh-huh.
Hibiscus tea is my favorite.
Mhm.
Peppermint tea is my second favorite. So, those are things that help us just connect with the inner self, so that we don't project out all of the impact of the trauma that we are feeling. When we feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders, or we're going like internally,
Yeah.
having access to all those things that I just shared are ways to help de-escalate your emotions, help you process them in a healthy way, and then communicate them back out to someone, and also say, I need support. It's okay to say I need support. It's okay to be okay. It's okay not to be okay. Don't stay stuck there. Ask for support. Ask for help. There's spaces, plenty.
Yeah. Yeah. It is just amazing, the simplicity of outside with no shoes on some grass or some dirt, and then the sun. So you got the sun and the vitamin D and what it does for your body physically, and then you have grounding yourself with literally the core of the earth. And so it's amazing, those simple things that we have at our fingertips that we can use.
Thank you. Listen, we're at the 2 o'clock hour here on the East Coast. I guess we're at the 11 o'clock hour on the West Coast. We're at the 1 o'clock hour in the South, in the Midwest,
Yeah.
South, that area down there. And this has really been rich. One of the things that we want to make sure that we do, want to appreciate Kenya Madison for joining us on our podcast. We want to appreciate all of you who've joined us and who've been making comments, and we're glad that you're here. You've helped make this podcast that much more rich and that much more informative. And we hope that there's something here we've had an opportunity to share that you can glean from, that you can take back into your communities. We invite you to become a part of the work that we do at Green the Church. You can connect to us at www.greenthechurch.org. Find out about us. Tell your pastor about us. Tell your congregation, your leadership. There's so much work that we're doing, and this is just one of the many things that we're involved in that makes this work possible. We have a couple of announcements that we want to share with you before we get out of here. Our national summit is happening in October. I believe October. The dates are, somebody help me with them real fast. The dates are October
14th. 12th through the 14th.
Yes, sir. In Atlanta, Georgia. There will be information available on our website soon about registration, but we're putting the information out in front of you now. Mark your calendars for October. There's also Earth Day events that are taking place. Green the Church will be involved in an Earth Day event. I believe the date Earth Day is April 22. Don't quote me.
It is.
I got it right.
Yes.
April 22 at the Greater Antioch Church in West Palm Beach. Plans are still being made for that. And if you'd like to participate in that in any way, please reach out to us at Greater Antioch Baptist Church, 1919 Spruce Avenue. You can catch us on our website, www.greaterantioch.org. What's the other announcements I need to share?
The next podcast.
Thank you. Go ahead, Emily. The next podcast.
The next podcast will be, we're doing these every other week. So the next podcast will be that of March the 27th. Please mark your calendars, and we'll be here with another great conversation. So March 27th is the next podcast.
I think this is Kenya. Go ahead. Go ahead.
If you're in the Shreveport, Louisiana area, we will celebrate Earth Day with Shreveport Green Baptist Church on Sprague Street in the city as well.
Thank you. And Kenya, anything you want to share that's happening with your organization or some of the organizations you're tied to? Now,
Sure. And just Grateful, thankful, blessed, very much appreciating the opportunity to be in this space with you all, representing not just the 33444 zip code, but Palm Beach County, the state of Florida. Very proud to be able to hold that space. I would remind people or encourage people to please follow us across our platforms. We are Healthier Delray Beach on Facebook. We are on Instagram, and we do have a website. There's so much information embedded in those places. Also, please follow the Get Your Green On platform. That is our student-led, student-created, generated mental health awareness campaign that is intended to be a global campaign. We amplify that in May. However, we promote it all year long. And it has its own landing page, getyourgreenon.org, getyourgreenon.org. And there's resources, toolkit, anything mental health related, trauma informed care related, embedded in that space, getyourgreenon.org. I will just say that as it relates to the summary of this conversation, that resilience is the ability to heal, adapt, and rise, rooted in our community, strengthened by our faith, and sustained through collective action. We will rise.
Wonderful.
I like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, we're getting ready to get out of here, as Dr. Carroll would say. As Dr. Carroll would say, shun not the struggle. The struggle is the gift. The race is on. And we thank you so much for being with us. Join us in 2 more weeks. And we look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much, Kenya, for sharing with us on today. Thank you, Pastor Bruce. Thank you, Pastor Emily. God bless. God bless. That's it. See you all. I'll reach out to you, Pastor Thicklin. God bless you. All right. Amen.
The race is on.